The gavel slammed like a gunshot. In an instant, the courtroom erupted. Screams split the air, echoing off wood-paneled walls as Janelle Carter collapsed to her knees. Her sobs tore through the tension, her hands clawing at the floor as the bailiff rushed toward her. Her son, Michael, just 17, stood motionless, his wrists bound in heavy iron cuffs. He didn't cry. He didn't flinch. His face was blank, drained of color, as if the soul had already left the body. Cameras flashed. One caught the precise moment Janelle's body went limp. The judge's expression was hard, unreadable, as if this were routine. From the gallery came mutters of, "Justice, sir." But Michael whispered something as the deputy led him away. His voice was barely audible. "This wasn't justice," he said. "This was revenge." No one in the crowd reacted. No one even heard him. But the camera caught his lips moving, a final quiet rebellion before the cell door slammed shut. 3 days earlier, Michael Carter stood in front of the bathroom mirror, adjusting his tie, crooked and too tight, but determined. It was the day of his mock trial in school, and he had been chosen to play the prosecutor. His mother, Janelle, leaned on the doorway, her lips curled in a smile that tried to hide her pride. "You look like a lawyer," she said. Michael frowned. "Not a doctor." Janelle laughed, brushing imaginary lint off his shoulder. "You don't look like a doctor," she smirked. He grinned back. "Good. I don't want to be one." He was smart, confident, and hopeful. The mirror caught the soft glow of morning sunlight bleeding in through the window. In that quiet moment, neither of them knew how little time was left. That soon Michael wouldn't be playing prosecutor, he'd be the accused. And this small morning ritual would be one of the last fragments of innocence they'd share. After school, Michael waited tables at a dusty little diner off Highway 6. Grease stains lined his apron, and the orders came in faster than he could write. Yet he smiled at every customer, cracked jokes with the cooks, and never missed a refill. Janelle would sit at the counter after her shift as a hospital custodian, sipping weak coffee and watching her son work. He always made time to kiss her forehead in passing. The regulars adored him. "Kid's got manners," said one. "Too good for this place," said another. Michael never said much back. But his eyes always searched the door, waiting for someone or something. A scholarship letter maybe, or just a sign that all this hard work meant something. That night, he cleaned the last table, took out the trash, and walked home under amber streetlights. He didn't know then, that was the last normal night of his life. The night of the party was chaos wrapped in red cups and loud music. Michael had come only to pick up his friend Andre, but found himself in a blur of arguments, alcohol, and broken things. Upstairs, voices clashed. Downstairs, someone was screaming. Then, a single loud crack. Silence followed. Michael froze. He ran toward the sound and found Andre collapsed, blood pooling fast. Someone else ran past him, a blur in a varsity jacket. Sirens arrived within minutes. The rest was confusion. Fingers pointed, panic spread, and in the absence of clarity, Michael became the suspect. He had no weapon, no motive. But he was there. And that, apparently, was enough. The police didn't ask many questions. They saw Michael in the room, and that was enough. He was cuffed in the front yard, still in shock, his shirt stained with blood that wasn't his. Janelle arrived at the scene minutes later, sprinting barefoot across the wet lawn. "That's my son," she screamed. "Let him go." They told her to step back. They pushed her. She didn't care. Michael met her eyes once before they forced him into the back of the squad car. His mouth didn't move, but his eyes said everything. "I don't understand. Help me." And then just like that, he was gone. The sirens wailed off into the night. Janelle stood alone on the curb, shaking, as the neighbors watched from behind their curtains. That was the beginning. In the weeks leading up to the trial, Michael's world began to shrink. The visits from friends stopped. Teachers no longer returned Janelle's calls. The public defender assigned to him, Mr. Klein, wore tired suits and looked like he hadn't slept in years. "We'll try for a deal," he said without looking up from his papers. Janelle leaned across the table. "My son didn't do this." Klein sighed. "And the DA doesn't care." The pretrial hearing lasted 10 minutes. No witnesses were called. No objections made. Michael sat like a ghost beside his lawyer, shoulders slumped, hands clenched in his lap. Janelle watched from the gallery, her eyes burning. "They've already decided," she whispered to herself. In the hallway, a reporter asked her what she thought of the case. She didn't answer, but the way she stared into the camera, quiet, unblinking, unreadable, told the world what was coming. She would not back down. At home, the silence was deafening. Michael's room remained untouched, textbooks still stacked, a poster of a science fair wing curling at the edges. Janelle would stand in the doorway some nights, staring at the bed, unmoving. The house echoed with the absence of his voice. On the kitchen table, she kept his letters in a shoebox, lined paper filled with careful handwriting and fading hope. "Mom, I'm okay," he wrote. "They mostly leave me alone." But the lies were obvious. He didn't say much about prison, only hinted at it. "The nights are loud," he wrote once. "The dark is louder." Janelle kept reading the same lines over and over. Sometimes she'd respond. Most times she just couldn't. She cooked dinner for two, washed his clothes, even though he wasn't there. Her heart clung to routine, as if ritual could summon him back. At the diner, Michael's absence became a haunting rhythm. The regulars noticed. His apron hung behind the kitchen door like a forgotten uniform. One evening, a couple asked Janelle if he'd quit. She smiled politely, nodded, and walked straight to the bathroom where she locked the door and cried silently against the tiles. Outside, the world moved on. His school removed his name from the debate team banner. His scholarship application disappeared from the website, as if erasing him made it easier for everyone. But Janelle wouldn't let him vanish. She pinned his photo to the diner's corkboard, right next to a flyer for lost dogs. When the manager took it down, she put it back up the next day. "He's not gone," she said. "He's coming home." She said it like a vow, not to them but to herself. Michael's letters began to shift. The optimism faded, replaced by quiet desperation. "I try to remember sunlight," one read. "But it's getting harder." He described the screams at night, the guards who didn't care, the older inmates who circled like wolves. He never asked for pity, just to be remembered. "Don't let them forget me," he wrote once. Janelle folded that letter and placed it in her wallet, carrying it with her like a weapon. She visited the prison once a week, riding 2 buses and walking half a mile. The guards made her wait, made her take off her shoes, made her feel like the criminal. But every time the glass divided them, Michael smiled, or tried to. "You still believe me, right?" he asked once. And Janelle said, "I never stop." She pressed her hand to the glass. He pressed his back. That was all they had left. The mailbox became Janelle's battlefield. Each morning she checked it, hoping for a reply from the governor's office, a response from the Innocence Project, anything. Each letter was a rejection. "We regret to inform you. Case does not meet review criteria. Insufficient grounds for appeal." She pinned them to her kitchen wall, row by row, like trophies from a war she refused to stop fighting. At church, friends told her to move on. At work, they whispered behind her back. But every night, Janelle sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by files, timelines, and scribbled notes. A wall of names, photos, and phone numbers formed in her living room, her own version of justice. She didn't sleep much anymore. "If no one else will look," she whispered once into the dark, "then I will." It began with a whisper, then a search. Janelle stood outside the house where the party happened, just after sunset. The porch light flickered, and the door remained closed. Grass had grown wild across the yard. She knocked. No answer. She knocked again. A curtain twitched upstairs. Then, silence. Neighbors peeked out but said nothing. She left a note. Just a phone number and 4 words. You saw what happened. That night, she walked the street where Michael had been arrested, memorizing every crack in the pavement, every shadow near the curb. She found the spot where he had looked at her for the last time. A smear of rust red still stained the sidewalk. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. But her eyes burned with something different now, not grief. Strategy. Dial. This wasn't just mourning anymore. This was preparation. Janelle had stopped waiting for mercy. Now, she was building her own justice, brick by silent brick. At work, Janelle moved like a ghost. She scrubbed the same stretch of hallway 3 times in one shift. A nurse asked if she was okay. I'm just tired, she lied. But her mind wasn't on the mop. It was on timelines, witness lists, buried memories. At night she rewatched footage from a neighbor's doorbell camera, not of the crime, but the aftermath. Teens running. Run down. Sirens flashing. One figure stood still longer than the others. A girl. Frozen. Janelle paused the frame, zoomed in. Brown hair, shaking hands, a look of horror. Janelle printed the image. She didn't know her name, but something in that girl's eyes screamed truth. You saw it, Janelle whispered to the screen. She just had to find her before someone else made her disappear. Injustice was quiet. She was learning. Not always loud and violent. Sometimes it wore a white coat and a smile. Her name was Elena. 17. Same age as Michael. Janelle tracked her down through school rosters and yearbook photos. When she finally saw her, it was after school in a strip mall parking lot. Elena smoked a cigarette with shaking hands, hoodie pulled over her face. Janelle approached slowly. You were at the house. Elena's eyes widened, and she started to run. Janelle didn't chase. She simply said, he didn't do it, you know that. Elena stopped. Trembled. Turned. I saw who did, she whispered. I saw him. Her voice cracked. But he told me to shut up. Said if I talked I'd disappear too. Janelle didn't blink. Tell me anyway. But before Elena could answer, a car pulled up fast at the curb. The girl's face changed. She backed away. I can't, she said and ran. The door slammed, tires screeched. And just like that, she was gone again. The next day, Elena didn't show up at school. Janelle called her number, disconnected. Visited her house, empty. The windows were boarded, mailbox overflowing. Panic surged through Janelle's veins. She tried the local paper. Nothing. Elena had vanished without a trace. And the silence was deafening. Janelle stormed the police station with the photo in hand, demanding someone look into it. You don't even know her last name, they said. She's not in the system. The officer didn't even pretend to write it down. Go home, ma'am. Janelle didn't. She sat on the bench outside the station until night fell. She wasn't just losing faith in justice. She was starting to believe it had never existed in the first place. When the wind picked up, she pulled Michael's letter from her coat pocket. Don't let them forget me. She wouldn't. Not now. Not ever. That night, Janelle lit a candle and opened Michael's box of letters again. She spread them across the living room floor like puzzle pieces. Each line was another wound. Each date, another missed moment. And in the middle of it all, his handwriting, trembling but alive. You still out there? One letter read. You still believe me? Janelle began to write. Not to Michael, but to every journalist she could find. To every civil rights group. To senators, bloggers, podcasters, college kids with microphones. The system had closed its ears. But maybe the world hadn't. She didn't sleep. She typed. She mailed. She called. Her voice, once a whisper, had become relentless. Not angry, exact. Not desperate, deliberate. And as dawn broke across her window, She finally paused, stared into the light, and said aloud, "They're going to hear me." It came as a phone call at 3:17 a.m. Janelle nearly dropped the receiver. The voice was distorted, hushed, like someone hiding in a closet. "You're right," the caller whispered. "The tape exists." Janelle froze. "What tape?" A pause. "From across the street. That night. Security cam. It shows everything. Your son didn't touch him." Her breath caught. "Who are you?" The line clicked. "Gone." Janelle sat in the dark for a long time, the dial tone buzzing like static in her skull. She replayed the voice, the cadence, the fear. It was real. She knew it. She dug through her records, a map of the neighborhood around the crime scene. One building had private security, a liquor store across the street. She'd asked before. They said footage was gone. Now she knew that was a lie. Someone still had it, and someone wanted her to find it. The question wasn't whether the truth existed. It was whether she could survive bringing it to light. The liquor store was closed when Janelle arrived, early morning haze still hanging in the air. She waited. When the owner showed up, keys jingling, she didn't plead. She showed him Michael's photo. "You said you lost the footage," she said. The man, late 50s, grizzled, shifted uneasily. "I was told to. By who? People you don't argue with." Janelle didn't flinch. "Where is it?" He hesitated, then unlocked the door. Inside, he rummaged through a dusty drawer, pulled out an old hard drive. "If anyone asks, I never saw you." She took it with both hands like it was sacred. "I'll say you were closed." She walked out into the morning light, chest pounding, grip tight. She didn't yet know what the footage would show, only that it was hers now. A piece of truth wrestled back from the silence. The footage was grainy, time-stamped, and undeniable. Janelle sat alone at her kitchen table, laptop screen flickering. On it, the street outside the party house. Teens scattered. A fight. Then, Michael rushing in too late. In the corner of the frame, another boy, taller, white, in a varsity jacket. He punches, pushes, flees. Michael kneels beside the fallen friend. He never strikes. Never even lifts a hand. Janelle hit pause. Rewind. Play. Mr. Continue. Again. And again. The timestamp matched the night of the murder. The jacket. Unmistakable. But it wasn't just any boy. Her hand trembled as she zoomed in. It was the Dai's nephew. She'd seen him once in court, smirking in the gallery. Her breath shortened. This wasn't mishandling. This was a cover-up. They knew. They all knew. And now, so did she. She brought the footage to Mr. Klein. He didn't even look at it. "You can't just dig up evidence on your own," he said. "Chain of custody matters." Janelle stood, shaking. "You mean the chain that put my son in prison?" He sighed. "Even if it's legit, they'll say it's tampered. It's not admissible. So, what do I do? You pray." She left before he finished the sentence. She no longer believed in prayer, not like that. She believed in pressure. So she took the footage elsewhere. To reporters, podcast producers, college film students, anyone who'd watch. Most slammed the door. One didn't. A young woman with a voice recorder and fire in her eyes. "We run a series on wrongful convictions," she said. "But if this is real, it'll burn everything down." Janelle nodded. "Then, light the match." That night, Janelle couldn't sleep. The house buzzed with tension. Every light stayed on. She stared at the living room wall, where a timeline of names, events, and photos now took up half the space. She had mapped it like a crime scene, only this time, the crime wasn't the murder. It was the cover-up. The city was sleeping, but she was wide awake, listening, waiting. Ganshao. Every car outside made her rise. Every creak of the floorboards sent her heart racing. If they'd hidden a tape, what else would they hide to protect their own? But she wasn't afraid. Not anymore. She poured herself a cup of coffee, sat down, and stared at the screen. The Da's nephew. The timestamp. The silence. Tomorrow, she whispered, the world sees it. She hit upload. Janelle walked into the courthouse with the flash drive clenched in her palm like a blade. She wore Michael's tie, the same crooked one from his mock trial years ago. The clerk barely looked up as she asked for a meeting with the Dada. By appointment only, he said. She placed the drive on the counter. This shows who really killed Andre Williams. And it wasn't my son. The clerk stared at it, then her, unmoved. Leave it, he said. We'll pass it along. She didn't move. You won't. But I will. She marched past security, past protest signs and stairs, straight into the DA's lobby before being stopped. Voices rose. Phones came out. A guard tried to escort her out, gently at first, then not so gently. But before she was pushed through the door, she turned to the crowd. They buried the truth. Now watch what happens when we dig it back up. Someone started filming. The moment had begun. The video went online the next day, clipped, titled, shared. A teenage intern at the podcast network uploaded it first. Then a local newspaper picked it up. Then a criminal justice blog. Then a national anchor. Mother claims to buried exonerating footage. It spread like wildfire. Hashtags. Think pieces. Heated panel debates. At first the DA's office issued a vague denial. Unverified evidence, they said. But the internet doesn't forget. Side-by-side screenshots of the DA's nephew at the scene circulated within hours. Janelle didn't have to scream anymore. The world was doing it for her. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse. Students marched. Someone painted Michael's face on the wall of a train station. Still here, in red letters, underneath. Janelle watched it all unfold from her couch, Michael's last letter in her hands. It had begun with silence. But now the city was finally making noise. The DA held a press conference 3 days later. Flanked by cold-faced staff, he called it a coincidence. Claimed his nephew had nothing to do with the altercation, and left before it escalated. But reporters pushed. Why was the footage withheld? Why wasn't it submitted as evidence? He stumbled. It was misplaced. The cracks were widening. Meanwhile, Janelle had help now. A pro bono legal team formed from retired defense attorneys and law students, hungry for justice. They filed for a full review of Michael's case. The request hit the court within hours. Newly discovered evidence, it read. The same courthouse that once buried Michael now had to let him speak again. Janelle stood on the steps with her team behind her, flashbulbs popping like gunfire. You silenced him once, she said into a dozen microphones. Now he'll be heard. Her voice didn't shake. It cut. The judge tried to delay. We need time to review the material, he said. But the people outside weren't waiting. The protest had swelled. Janelle returned to court wearing a ribbon in Michael's favorite color. As she walked through security, someone whispered, "She's the one who found the tape." Courtroom was packed. Reporters, students, even off-duty cops sat in tense silence. The DA's team looked pale. The judge's gavel hit the wood, not as confident as before. Motion to reopen the case of Michael Carter. That name, spoken in the open again, felt like thunder. Janelle squeezed her hands in her lap. Michael's seat sat empty beside the new defense counsel. But his presence was everywhere, in the crowd, in the silence, in the fear tightening the DA's jaw. Truth had finally made it through the doors. Now it just had to survive. The leak came the next morning. An anonymous upload. Internal emails, transcripts, even a memo titled, "Keep the footage off the record." The fallout was instant. Headlines exploded. The covered evidence, nepotism and negligence. City officials scrambled. An emergency review board was convened. The DA refused interviews, then resigned. But for Janelle, the moment came quietly. She stood in her living room as the news anchor announced, "Michael Carter will be brought back to court for a retrial." She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just closed her eyes. Her son would stand before a judge again, but this time the world would be watching. She picked up his photo, kissed the corner, and whispered, "We're not finished. Not yet." Michael sat in the transport van, wrists cuffed, ankles chained. It had been 7 years since he'd last seen the sun rise over this city. His reflection in the van's tinted window startled him. Older, leaner, harder. But beneath it, the same boy who once recited case law for fun. The courthouse loomed ahead. He looked up slowly, eyes unreadable. The guards were quiet, almost reverent now. He stepped out into the morning light, blinking like it burned. Janelle waited at the entrance. She didn't run. She didn't cry. She only held out her hand. Michael took it. No words. Just the grip of two survivors meeting in open air. Reporters swarmed behind barricades. Flashbulbs popped. But for that moment, it was just them. She brushed dust from his collar like she used to. "Ready?" she asked. Michael didn't nod. He just walked forward, the only direction that mattered. Inside the courtroom, time moved slowly. Michael sat at the defense table, no longer in chains, wearing a simple suit borrowed from a volunteer group. His hands trembled under the table, but his eyes stayed sharp. Across from him, the new prosecutor flipped pages with mechanical precision. Janelle sat behind him, her presence a quiet shield. When the footage was played for the record, the room went still. Frame by frame, the truth unfolded. The punch, the jacket, the blood, Michael kneeling. A different judge presided now. Younger, downer in age, less sure. When he looked at Michael, he didn't see a file. He saw a person. The air in the room thickened. Michael's attorney leaned in. "They're shaken. You can see it." Michael didn't smile. He just stared straight ahead. He'd waited years for this. No one was looking away now. The moment came when Michael stood. The judge asked if he wanted to address the court. He nodded once. The room quieted. He stepped forward, eyes sweeping over reporters, lawyers, the jury box, and finally the gallery, where the DA's former staffers sat silent. 7 years ago, he began, "I walked in here as a student, not a suspect." His voice didn't shake. "I didn't get a trial. I got a sentence." He paused. "You stole everything from me. And you sleep just fine." Gasps scattered through the gallery. He turned to the judge. "I don't want pity. I want to be seen. I want to be heard." Then to Janelle, "And I want my mother to be able to sleep again." He stepped back. The courtroom wasn't silent. It was stunned. In that moment, Michael wasn't just a defendant. He was undeniable. The judge's decision didn't take days. It took hours. "The court acknowledges the miscarriage of justice," he said. "The conviction is vacated." The gavel fell. Just once, light, almost ashamed. The room erupted. Applause. Tears. Shouts. Janelle clutched her chest, gasping, not from shock but release. Michael sat frozen for a second longer, as if waiting for someone to pull him back. Then he turned to her. She rushed forward and wrapped him in her arms. Reporters shoved microphones. Cameras flashed. But in that moment, they didn't matter. She whispered, "We made it." Michael held on like he never wanted to let go. For the first time in years, the doors of the courtroom meant freedom. But even as he stepped out into the sun again, there was no celebration in his face, only calm, hard-earned and fragile. Outside the courthouse, the world waited. Crowds parted as Michael stepped into the open air. But there was no fist raised, no speech delivered, just quiet. Cameras followed him down the steps, but he kept walking, past the podium, past the crowd. He found a corner where no one stood. Janelle followed, standing beside him. "You're free," she said softly. "Not yet," he replied. "Not until someone pays for what they did." She didn't argue. She understood. This wasn't the end, only a crack in the wall. The media would chase other stories. The city would move on. But the damage wouldn't. Michael looked out across the city he once loved. Then down at his hands. "I lost everything," he said. "But I'm still here." Janelle took his hand in hers. "Then we begin. Again." And for the first time in years, he nodded. Michael didn't go home that night. He didn't want a welcome party. No balloons. No cameras. He asked Janelle to drive him somewhere quiet. She understood. They pulled up to the cemetery just before dusk. The grass was damp. The sky, a faded orange. Michael walked alone. Found Andre's grave beneath a crooked oak. He stood for a long time before kneeling. "I'm sorry," he said. "For not speaking sooner. For thinking silence was safer." He placed a hand on the headstone, fingers trembling. "They made me afraid, and I let them." He swallowed hard. "But I'm still here. I made it out." Behind him, Janelle stayed at the car, arms folded, eyes on her son. He didn't cry. Neither did she. But something broke open in the silence. Not pain, not anger, but space. Space for what came next. In the following weeks, Michael moved slowly through the world. Crowds made him flinch. Bright lights triggered headaches. Simple things, a door shutting footsteps at night, left him cold. Janelle tried not to hover, but she couldn't help watching him. One afternoon, he stood in front of the mirror in his old bedroom. Same frame. Dull. Same cracked corner. But the boy who used to fix his tie was gone. He didn't recognize the man staring back. "What now?" he asked his reflection. No answer. Later that night, Janelle placed a new letter on his bed, unopened. She had written to the governor again. This time not for her son, but for others like him. Michael read it. "You're not done," it said. "And neither am I." He folded it carefully. He didn't smile, but his chest lifted just a little. The news cycle moved on. Reporters packed up. The mural faded under new graffiti. But Janelle kept going. She attended rallies, spoke at high schools, sat in meetings with other mothers holding framed photos of the wrongly accused. She didn't rehearse. She didn't need to. Her presence was a sermon. Michael joined her once, just to listen. The auditorium was small. No cameras. Just folding chairs and a dusty floor. She stood with a photo in one hand and silence in the other. "They told me to move on," she said. "But if I had, my son would still be in a cage." The room didn't erupt. It nodded. It understood. Michael sat in the back, hat low, watching her. In that moment he saw it clearly. The strength that had carried him through darkness. Not loud. Not showy. Just unstoppable. One evening, Michael opened a blank notebook. Just lines and possibilities. He didn't know if he wanted to go back to school. Or work. Or anywhere. But he needed to write. He wrote about noise. About fear. About silence. About being 17 and swallowed by a system designed to forget him. And about surviving it. Janelle passed by his door, saw the pen moving, and said nothing. The act was enough. That night, she poured 2 cups of tea and waited. When he finally came out, he didn't speak. He just slid the notebook onto the table and sat down across from her. "Is this how it starts?" he asked. She looked at the title he'd scribbled on the first page. "You don't look like a doctor," it read. She smiled. "It's how it continues." Months later, Michael stood outside the same courthouse that had once stolen his life. A new case was being tried inside. Another young boy, same age he'd been. Same background. He watched the mother pace in front of the steps, tight jaw, trembling hands, holding her child's jacket. Michael didn't speak to her. He didn't have to. He turned to the camera. No press this time, just a student documentary crew. What? They asked what he'd learned. He paused. Justice isn't blind, he said. It's just expensive. He adjusted his collar, stepped back from the lens, and walked into the building. Not as a victim. Not even as a symbol. Just as a man trying to change what broke him. The camera lingered on the closing doors. A gavel echoed faintly from inside. Then, silence.